One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Alrighty. We are in the last few episodes of 2020, and I felt like we really needed to go out with a bang. And I had a totally different episode planned for today, but I'm gonna let you in on a little secret, okay? So, I took several days off over the last week, and I have realized that I have to channel my energy. If you don't know this about me, or if you cannot tell from this podcast, I'm a very energetic person. I come by that naturally, and I drink a lot of coffee. So energy is one of those things I just have a ton of. And since I took several days off, I was really inspired to just tackle some projects around my house that, let's just be honest, I've been ignoring for a long time. I laugh only because it's really bad. It's really, really bad. Like our closet and our bedroom just got totally out of hand. I know you've heard me talk about laundry before. If you've listened to this podcast, you've heard me talk about my hate of laundry and how there would just be piles of it in the floor in my closet. And I just got to a point where I'm like, oh my gosh, this is enough. I'm taking time off of work. I'm going to organize my house. And I was introduced to The Home Edit. Okay, if you've never heard of this show, it is on Netflix, and it is like my new guilty pleasure, 100%. And it's so funny because I did like the Marie Kondo, like KonMari, Your Life, Find Joy, Spark Joy, like all those things. I did that several years ago. And I got really good at getting rid of a lot of things, but I didn't really create a system after I would do everything. So why the long story? Why this long explanation of me and my own personal issues in my house? Well, it inspired today's episode because I wanted to talk about ways that you, yes, you, podcast listener, can be more organized with your podcast. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of podcasting, think of this show as the time-saving shortcut you've been looking for. So let's get right to it, shall we? Okay, so like I was admitting in the very beginning, I really needed to take some time off, and I'm so glad that I did because I have just been ignoring a lot of things in my house for a long time, and I think that I didn't really want to do them. Sometimes they're just not fun, right? Like taking everything out of your closet, like organizing bags and just stuff that's been sitting there forever. And you're just like, oh yeah, I'll get to it. It finally got to a point where I was like, I have no other excuse. Like I took time off work. I'm not working. There's no fires to be put out anywhere right now. No one else is working because it's the holidays. So all of my excuses were gone. I really needed to kind of face the facts and look at the things that I'd been ignoring. Well, this has also happened to me and my podcast. Now, I'm going to dive into 4 different ways that you can be more organized with your podcast, right? Because we're going into a new year. And I know a lot of people are looking for new habits to start, or maybe they're looking for a way to like really hit the ground running in the new year. And being super organized with your podcast is a way to make that happen, to where you sit down to record and you just feel good about it. You know where everything is. You don't have to look around for files on your computer or in your software, like whatever the case may be. So I'm going to give you 4 tips for how you can be more organized. But I also want to like tell you a little bit about my New Year's resolution, mostly for accountability, right? I really just want someone to hold me accountable and say, Crystal, I remember what you said. Have you been cleaning up your act? Because you told us that you were going to do it. So one of my big goals in the new year is to be more digitally organized. Now, I recently did a big overhaul of I use Google Drive. Me and my project manager, we're in and out of there all the time. And then I share files with other contractors, or maybe someone, they send me their bio and then I get it that way. So I really wanted to get more organized. So I kind of cleaned up my act there, but there are some other places where I just need to streamline and make it all flow a lot better. So I say that because you are not alone. If you have just a total mess with your files right now, it's okay, but we need to face this together, right? We need to look at what we have, that we can make it better and clean up our act a little bit, right? Because if you're like me and if you've been ignoring things for a while, then it's time to get more organized. So here we are. We're going to dive into the 4 ways that you can be more organized with your podcast. So number 1, I want you to have a podcast content calendar. Now, I'm going to link in the show notes. So crystalprofit.com/episode 215 is where you're going to find this. But I have done a few YouTube videos on how to create a podcast content calendar. Now, I got to be really honest. I did one video on 4 ways that you can set one up. And then I did kind of a deep dive in Asana. While I think Asana is fantastic for doing projects, and I actually don't totally make fun of me, but I did an Asana project plan for my home organization. I took pictures and I uploaded them, and I did all the shelving measurements for my closet. Yeah, I totally nerded out on all the home organization stuff, and I did that in Asana, but I don't love it for my content calendars. I really don't. I don't know what it is about it, but it doesn't flow as naturally for me for my content. I literally use a Google Sheet that is what I use. If you want to use Excel, do that. But I use a simple spreadsheet. It's not fancy. I'm actually looking at it here now. And I do it, my brain thinks best in quarters of the year. So I like to know what's going on, because usually when I'm planning my promotional calendar, like if I'm going to talk about my course, or I'm going to talk about my membership, or I have another affiliate thing going on, then I will plan how I'm going to promote that on my podcast in my podcast content calendar. So I like to look at it 3 months at a time. So I'm actually going to open it up right here. And I'm going to tell you, so for my 3-month quarter one of 2021, I'm looking at it, and this is exactly how it is laid out. It is the day of the week, like when it's going to air. So it either be Tuesday or Thursday, because that's when these episodes are published. Then it has the published date. So I know exactly when this episode is going to go live. Then I have the topic or title. Sometimes I'll put both in there. And then I have the episode number. Now, this is really important because whenever I'm planning all these episodes, I open this right before I start recording and I make sure I have the right episode number, because then it just makes it easier for me to tell you the show notes. I literally looked at my content calendar before I started recording and I was like, okay, what episode number is this? Because I need to make sure and say that so I can tell them where to go for the show notes. And then I have a column that says notes, and I'll throw little things in there. Like if I have an idea, and I'll just put the topic or the title in there. Well, if I need something to reference, because y'all, like quarter one is done. Quarter one of 2021 is totally planned out. I'm actually throwing ideas into quarter two because that's how far ahead I work. And I get ideas all the time. So whenever I get an idea, and I'm like, am I going to remember what that's about? I'll go over to the notes column and put some notes in there on what I'm actually going to talk about. And then I have another column that has opt-ins or promotional stuff. So I know, oh, that's when I'm going to be launching this thing. So I want to make sure and promote that. So a content calendar is a must to stay organized. Like a bare minimum, this is the number one thing that you should have in 2021 if you do not already have this, okay? So you must have a content calendar, because if you're just flying by the seat of your pants every single week, it's going to catch up to you and you're eventually going to be like, oh my gosh. Like it's one of the things that leads to burnout, not having a plan, not knowing what you're talking about, or it just leads to you not publishing on a regular basis, which also can lead to burnout eventually, because you're like, what's the point? Why am I doing this? No one's listening to my show. Well, a lot of people aren't listening to your show because you're not very organized and you're not in it, right? Like you're just like, I'll throw something up there. I don't even care about this podcast anymore. I'm just gonna throw it up there. And that makes my heart hurt, okay? I want you to be excited about your podcast. I want you to say, oh my gosh, I'm so excited because I have everything planned out. Okay, I'm going to stop talking about content calendars because I could just keep going and going. But go to the show notes. You can check out the videos that I've already done. Again, there's a video on Asana, but for those of you that are in profit podcasting, because I know several of my students listen to this podcast, I want you to go to the brand new tech library that we recently did, and it has some videos on file organization and all kinds of things like that too. So I wanted to make sure and throw that out there, because this is actually the second thing that we're going to talk about is having your podcast files organized. So if you're a profit podcasting student, you can go into your tech library and actually see how I'd take you on a tour of my Google Drive and how it's all organized. But for those of you listening, I wanted to give you a little sneak peek into what that looks like as well. So this is going to sound like a lot, and I'm not going to read you all of my categories, right? Because this is more of a visual thing. But I have very specific files and folders created for my podcast. Now, when I was first doing the rookie life, right? When I first started podcasting, my files looked a lot different. They were just files, and I dropped all my audio files in there. And as you can imagine, I started creating more files, and then I started doing interviews, and I had multiple audio things that I had to deal with, and I didn't have a great naming system. So eventually, just like my closet, it became a very unorganized mess of chaos. Like it just was so crazy. And so now I have gotten better about keeping things in their proper folders. Even like as I'm recording this podcast, I already have it, like the work in progress, saved in the folder that it's supposed to go to eventually whenever we're done. Because I don't want to just create a random file and then say, where was it? Did I save it to my desktop? Is it in my documents folder? Where did that file go? So here's like a little extra quick tip, life hack, podcast hack is once you start creating your podcast episode, like let's say you record a piece of the intro, go ahead and save it where you know you want it to be in the future, because it will just make your life so much easier when you go to find it in the future to upload it to your hosting site, or if you're going to use it for creating a soundbite or transcripts, whatever reason you would need to use your podcast after it's created, you want to have it in the folder it's supposed to be. So let's go on a quick tour, okay? Hi, I'm Crystal. I will be your tour guide for the remainder of the podcast audio files. Okay, that was a little weird, but just bear with me. So I have 14 folders. And like I said, I knew that was going to be a lot. And you're like, oh my gosh, this lady's crazy. It's okay. I take it. You can judge me. You cannot judge me, whatever. But I have 14 files. And one of those files is all of my archived files that I have for the rookie life. I don't know that I need these, but I kind of got to the point where I was like, I didn't want to delete them just yet. I have a little bit of like an attachment to them, but I also don't need them right now, like as I'm working on this podcast. So I just put them in an archive folder. They're there in case I need them. But I'm going to start from the top down, and I'm just going to read through them real fast. That way you can get some ideas on what kind of folders you would need in your podcast audio files. So number one, at the very top, I have a folder that is for podcast episodes all. Like these are all of my podcast episodes. This is the Profit Podcast, Potty Report. Now there are subfolders like nested in here, but any kind of audio file goes into this one folder. And then under there, I have podcast content planning, which is where my content calendar lives. Then I have graphics, which are logos and pictures that guests send to me, like their headshots. I'll put them in there. Then I have lead magnets, which is where I will put my actual PDFs or graphics, videos, anything like that. I have all of my podcast lead magnets that I will promote on this show live all here. So if I ever need to grab that file really quickly, I will go there. The fifth folder is the podcast main theme. That's the Welcome to the Profit Podcast. And I put that specifically in its own folder. So whenever I'm editing, I can just drop it in there very easily. Then the next folder is my podcast music that lives all on its own. So again, I can grab it very easily. Then my next folder is ads. Now, my ads folder is made up of my self-sponsored ads, right? The ones that I create myself. And then I also have a space for affiliates and sponsored ads. Now, I don't do a lot of sponsored ads right now, but I want to have a placeholder for those because I do see those as an opportunity in the next year. So I want to have a space for them. That way I know, okay, as soon as I record these, that's exactly where they go. And then as far as my affiliate ads, I like to have those there because I will participate in different affiliates throughout the year. And I want to be able to listen to it and see like, oh, is that the right one? Do I still want to use that message, or do I want to archive that and create a new one? So that's my ads folder. Then I have guest interview information. That is for other people some people will send me like their Google Sheet, a Google Doc with their bio and other information on guesting. So I'll drop that into that folder. The next folder is my podcast show guidelines. And this is what I send to all of my guests. It's like, hey, this is who our podcast is. Like, I'm the host if we've never met. This is who our audience is. This is a little bit about how our interviews go. And I'm going to link to, I did an episode about podcast show guidelines and how that kind of works. And I want you to check that out. So again, the show notes for this episode are crystalprofit.com/episode 215. And then the next folder that we have is our podcast Facebook group. So that is the Profit Podcast online community. So I have graphics in there that I use on a regular basis, and any other information about the Facebook group is in there.
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
And then we have podcast guest appearances. That's for whenever I'm on someone else's show, whether it's a graphic or I keep my bio in that folder. Then I have kind of like an aspirational folder. It's for podcast Pinterest stuff that I want to start doing more of. So that one's kind of a placeholder. I don't really have a ton of Pinterest on there, but it's aspirational, right? Like we all have hopes and dreams to all be on all the platforms one day, and I'm not exempt from that either. So Pinterest is one of my big goals in the next year as well. And then I have podcast sound bites. So I will save my sound bites to my Google Drive. That way I can share them easily on my phone to Instagram stories. So once I've created a sound bite in Buzzsprout, I'll download it, drop it into this file, and then I can access this folder on my phone. Then I upload it to Instagram. And then again, I already talked about my archive folder. So I know that sounds like a lot. And you're like, oh my God, Crystal, you've gone off the deep end. Well, this was actually before I'm looking at these. I created all these folders in like 5 months ago. So this was way before the home edit ever entered my life. But it has made all the difference. Because before, I think I had like 6 folders. And I thought that was a lot. I thought, oh my gosh, who needs 6 folders? Now I've more than doubled that. And it really makes editing easier. It makes finding information whenever I find a guest, that wants to come on my show. I can say, okay, let me send them the show guidelines. I know exactly where they are. Or if I need to do some planning, I know exactly where my content calendar is. I know where my lead magnets are. I know where my music is. So I highly recommend getting organized with your podcast files so you know where everything is in the future, and it just makes your life so much easier. Okay, so that's number 2. Remember I told you we have 4 things to talk about today. That's number 2. We talked about your content calendar first, then your podcast files. Now, number 3 is we're going to talk about systems. You have to have systems in place for your podcast, okay? So that means interviews. That means creating show notes. That means uploading to Buzzsprout or whatever hosting site that you're using. That means doing transcripts. Like there's so many ways, like opportunities for you to implement systems that happen every single time you record a podcast episode. So I thought I would share a few systems with you on how I create my show, and then you can kind of go from there. But one of the things that I do, like I said, when I sit down to record, I will look at my content calendar, make sure I have all the information in there. I know what episode number it is. I look at my notes, whether I created notes in one of my notebooks, I created it in a Google Doc, wherever my notes are to record. I will have all of those sketched out. I'll have the working title of the episode, and then I will actually sit down, do a test clip. If you've heard my mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2, I do that every single time before I start recording. and then I will start recording. And then after we're done, I will save it and export it as an MP3 or a WAV file once it's all finished. Then from there, and I know this sounds like a lot, but I'm just kind of mentally walking you through like what everything looks like on my end, and maybe this can help you. But from there, I upload this episode will go after it's exported as a WAV file or MP3. It will be uploaded to Buzzsprout as well as Otter.ai, which is the platform I use to help me with my transcripts. I'm actually going to link to a YouTube video that I did about Otter, and it'll show you how it works. And I think it's fantastic. If you're a Buzzsprout user, they actually have a discount. I don't remember how much it was, if it was like 20% off of a year or what it was, but they have a discount for you to try Otter, but you can also use the free plan and get a ton out of there. You can at least try it for free. But I do my transcripts, and then I usually take a break. Like, I don't do the full production of this podcast in one sitting, but I do, like, after I'm done recording, go ahead, do any little quick edits that I need to do, move stuff around, mix the tracks together, and then export it and then immediately upload it. That way I don't forget to do that, because I use my transcripts to help me create my show notes. Like, that is a huge thing for me. It saves me so much time. And we'll get into that in another episode, because that's something that I get asked about a lot. But that's a system. So you've got to create systems. So, and this can be something you already do, but write it down. Write it down, like whatever you do. That way you have a checklist for yourself, and you can say, what do I do whenever I record my podcast? Because I want to make sure and do it the same every single time, because it makes your life so much easier. And the last thing I want to talk about is automations. Now, I've done podcast episodes and YouTube videos on how I do automations, and one of my favorites is using Calendly to help me with interviews. So if you're a solo podcaster, this may not apply to you, but in the show notes, I'm going to link to a few videos that I've done on automations and using Calendly to schedule your interviews. Oh my gosh, this is such a time saver that I wish I would have had whenever I first started my podcast, because I was going back and forth with the people I was going to interview. And it was so frustrating. For one, I hate email anyway. And for two, it was just like, oh, Wednesday at 12 doesn't work for you? Okay, what about Thursday? Oh, nope, that doesn't work. It was just this back and forth that was absolutely unnecessary. And I highly recommend Calendly to help you automate that, so you're not thinking about it. You can even set up when you want to do interviews, if you want to do them on certain days of the week or at certain times. So make your life easier by automating parts of your podcast. But that's all I have. So I'm going to do a quick recap real fast, because I want you to get more organized. I want this to be something that you just hit the ground running in the new year. And you're like, yes, I'm going to be so organized on my podcast, because I'm going to be excited to sit down and record. Like, this is my hope for everyone listening to this show. I want you to love podcasting as much as I do. I don't know if that's possible. Maybe you're like, Crystal, you're a little too over the top. That's okay. But like, come up to my level just a little bit in your organization, because it will help you just run your show, the production of it, a lot smoother. So number one, you got to have a content calendar. 2, you got to organize your podcast files. 3, have systems in place that you can duplicate every single time you go to record. And 4, set up some automations for your show to make it that much easier for you to create every single week. But that's all I have for you. So again, check out the show notes, crystalprofit.com/episode 215. Check them out. If this is your first time tuning in, I'm so happy that you're listening. And I hope that you're a subscriber to the show. If you've never listened to the show and this is your very first time, I would love for you to subscribe, leave us a rating and a review wherever you're listening to the podcast. And I'm going to sign off like I always do and let you know that you got to keep it up, because we all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.